Happy Thursday. Welcome to Board of Directors meeting for Salton Sea Authority on Thursday, November 14th, 2024. I'd like to call this meeting to order. And at this moment, I would ask John if you'd please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Would you please stand?
Ready, begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I will now ask for roll call.
President Dockstader,
Present.
Director Plancarte,
Good morning, here.
Director Aguilar,
Here.
Director Cardenas,
Good morning, President.
ex officio Samantha Arthur. Madam Chair, we have a quorum.
Thank you. At this time, I am asking if the board will review, do we need to change any of the order of agenda items to accommodate scheduling or other needs? Or can we go ahead and,
We do not have any recommended changes, Madam Chair.
thank you, appreciate that. Public comment time is reserved for commenting on any item that is not on the agenda. California law prohibits members of the board from acting on matters not on the agenda. Members of the public may address the board regarding any matter within the authority's jurisdiction, but are asked to speak to any specific item on the agenda at the time it is called. Speakers should state their name for the record and address all comments to the chair, limiting remarks to 3 minutes. At this time, do we have any public comments? I believe maybe we do. Mr. Reyes, good to see you. Thank you.
Eric Reyes. Well, I went to the La Quinta meeting last week because it had been posted that the ID was going to make a presentation on their new water transfer deal, which is greatly impacting the sea, as we saw in the Salton Sea Summit, some eye-opening figures that we saw there, a drop in elevation of the sea and so on. And I was told that it would be then presented this week, this month, at this meeting, I'm saying, in Imperial County. And once again, it's not on the agenda. So I just hope that it will be presented by the IAD, and it's really important for the public to understand what that deal entails and what you're going to present to the Salton Sea Authority. And I'm just wondering why it's not on here again. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reyes. At this time, are there any other public comments? Do I have any public comments online?
Not at this time.
Thank you. This time is set aside for members of the board to share thoughts and concerns regarding general authority matters not on the agenda, ask questions of staff, request items to be added to a future agenda. The Brown Act expressly prohibits lengthy board member discussion of matters not on the agenda. The board may, at its discretion, by a 4/5 vote, add items deemed to be an emergency to allow for public discourse. Do any of the board members have a public comment at this time?
I have a public comment, Madam Chair. I just would like to extend an invitation for Mr. Eric Reyes to give me a call. I'm more than happy to share any documents regarding the SKIA participation, and also announce that we are in active litigation currently regarding that document. And but more than happy to share any public documents that are available to the public as requested, and extend an invitation for a meeting at any time. My phone number is 760-996-0487. Thank you.
I appreciate it. I was also going to just reiterate the same thing, that at this time we are in litigation, and it has been advised that the Imperial Irrigation District not comment at this time. So, but I do appreciate Mr. Reyes showing up at our meetings. At this time, if there are no more board comments, I will go ahead and ask for possible board action on the consent calendar to approve, receive, and file the minutes, the register ratification, internal financial report, and approve the meeting's schedule and calendar. Are there any discussion?
Madam President, I would move approval of the consent calendar.
And I'll go ahead and second that, Madam President.
John Aguilar motioned it. The motion was seconded by Alex Cardenas. Can we please have a roll call vote?
President Dockstader,
Yes.
Director Plancarte,
Yes.
Director Aguilar.
Yes.
Director Cardenas.
Yes.
Motion passed.
Thank you. At this time, moving on, Salton Sea Authority 2024 Annual Report and Audit Presentation by Shannon Ayala and Davis Farr.
Madam President, I'm pleased to introduce Ms. Shannon Ayala, of the Davis Farr Firm, who's going to present our 2024 audit results. Ms. Ayala.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. I'm just going to start my slides and work on sharing them. Just want to confirm that you can all see the slides before I move forward.
We do.
Great. Okay. So I am happy to be here to present the results of the 2024 financial statement audit for the Salton Sea Authority. The responsibilities of the auditor are to audit the authority's financial statements in accordance with U.S. generally accepted auditing standards and government auditing standards. And that we plan our audit to express an opinion as to whether management's financial statements are fairly presented and in all material respects in accordance with those accounting principles and standards. So it does provide reasonable assurance and not absolute. And we did express an unmodified opinion, which is the highest level of opinion that can be received. So the audit process started with our fieldwork in September of 2024. We perform all audit procedures at this time, including our risk assessments, the planning and documentation of internal controls, as well as our test of transactions. And then we also substantively test all the material balance sheet accounts and analytically test the revenues and expenses. We had a couple areas of audit focus this year, including the continuing grant activities. So we review the revenues and expenses to ensure that all eligible expenses are in accordance with the grant agreements, as well as the revenues are recognized appropriately and in accordance with those accounting standards. And then there was a new accounting standard, GASB 87, implemented a couple of years ago that I'm sure affected most of your agencies. Didn't affect the Salton Sea Authority when it was implemented. However, it did affect them this year due to the new office lease. So that resulted in about a $25,000 or so right of use asset, and then an offsetting lease liability for that commitment on the new office lease. And then we did some additional testing for conflict of interest. So we obtained the Form 700 for each of the members of the board and determined if there were any conflicts of interest noted, and if so, followed up, and we didn't have any items to follow up on. And then I just want to reiterate, we did issue that unmodified opinion dated October 22nd, 2024. It's included in the financial statements in your package. We also issued the communication to those in governance letter, and that would indicate areas of significant risk, significant accounting estimates, and then any journal entries that we had as a result of audit procedures. I'm happy to report that there were no such journal entries. And then lastly, the government auditing standards opinion, and that's also known as the internal control letter. This year we did not have any items, best practice recommendations or items to report. And with that, I can answer any questions that you may have over the audit results or the audit process.
I don't have any questions. Do any members of the board have a question?
I do not, Madam President. I would just say congratulations to the staff for a good job. I know you have thin resources, but good job in getting us through the audit.
Well, we couldn't do it without direction of the board, so thank you.
And thank you, Shannon. We appreciate your report. It was very detailed.
Thank you.
At this time, do we have any public comments? No board comments? I will invite a motion to approve.
So move, Madam Chair.
Blancarta seconds.
Excellent. Motion was made and seconded. Can we get a roll call vote, please?
President Dockstader,
Yes.
Director Plancarte,
Yes.
Director Aguilar,
Yes.
Director Cardenas,
Yes.
motion passed.
I feel like saying, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now she can get paid.
Yeah. Thank you very much. We appreciate
Thank
that.
you.
Moving on to item C, health and safety update. Before we continue, I will say, just to keep the meeting streamlined, when I do ask for public comments and board comments, I will wait till after 1 through 4, item 1 through 4. Otherwise, we might be here all day. So appreciate your patience with that. So let's start with the Salton Sea Summit update.
Madam President, and I think that's appropriate because all of these are part of contextual presentation of a discussion that this board has been having for some time regarding comprehensively assessing the impacts from changes taking place at the sea and how we're communicating that to the people in the region. As we have previously discussed, there's a lot of work being done in this space by IID, by the air boards, by UCR and others. And we have been working collaboratively with our member agencies and stakeholders to develop a more overarching framework that will provide the people of the community an understanding and a sense of safety that these concerns are being responsibly addressed. The way we have this presentation structured, we're going to begin with an update from UCR on basically their the work that they've been doing at the Salton Sea, the summits that they've been holding, and the direction that they're going with their UCR Salton Sea program, followed by a presentation by Mr. Michael Cohen of the Pacific Institute, who's doing some work which was identified in last year's monitoring implementation plan, which addresses health risks more broadly throughout the region. Then I think that Ms. Yvonne Wilhoff will touch briefly on the monitoring implementation plans to 2025 update, which is being initiated. And then finally, I'll close with some remarks, which will refer to the memo that's in the board packet. And I would turn it over to Will for the UCR presentation. Thank you, Dr. Porter.
Thank you very much, Patrick. Yes, it's an honor to be here. Thank you for your time and for the invitation. It's my pleasure to be here as a representative of UCR Salton Sea Task Force to talk a little bit about our efforts, the reasons for our our focus on the Salton Sea, some of the challenges, of course, much of which is well known by those that are here at the meeting, that the Salton Sea presents, and how we attempt to address some of those challenges in terms of the scientific understanding about what's going on, and where we see our role as a task force, as a university, as a research community in kind of fitting into the push towards solutions. And so as everybody knows, the Salton Sea is remarkably complex, and it's complex both in environmental, scientific domain types of challenges, as well as we also know, social, political, economic realities as well. From a scientific perspective, in terms of the environmental science, we have this vast array of connections between many domains, from the water itself, inflows to chemistry, the air quality around the basin, as well as the land and land use, the ecology of the water and its surroundings, how that fits in with the human populations, including human health, and then the ongoing change of the structure of economics and the usage of resources, in particular recently in the form of the geothermal and lithium developments that's happening around the sea. In light of all these complexities, the Salton Sea Task Force was started by the late Dr. Marilyn Fogel, who at UCR during her tenure here made the Salton Sea a priority with the later years of her life, and really strove to develop a team of researchers, many of whom had already been working on Salton Sea topics in their own lanes and in their own areas, to try and tie all those together into a cohesive whole. And so Dr. Fogel, when I arrived at UCR in 2017, soon after my arrival, she reached out to me to see about my interest in looking at some of the air quality issues. I'm an air quality physicist and modeler by training, and she was very interested, of course, in the ongoing questions about dust and dust transport and human health. And I was thrilled to have this this huge challenge. Of course, not thrilled that the challenge existed, but that it was something meaningful that I could apply my training and my skills to in the context of this larger community of researchers at UCR. And so Dr. Fogel put together this team around 2018. She started getting this moving, and which led to this original product of the Crisis at the Salton Sea, the Vital Role of Science, which was written and published in 2020. I was a part of this, and you can see just, I won't go through all the names, but we have a wide array of names, which has grown since 2020, I'll mention, but it covers everything from the water quality in the water system to lithium extraction and the science of those technologies and the impacts on the environment. Myself, air quality and the particles that are related with Salton Sea emissions. David Lowe, of course, I think is well known by folks around here, looking at toxicology and looking at the impacts on human health, and just a huge range of researchers and staff, grad students and postdocs, all of whom are interested in working on many of the wide-ranging problems, environmentally speaking, at the Salton Sea. This is a group that, after Marilyn Fogel's unfortunate passing, is now led by a team of three. Myself taking the role of the director of this task force. Emma Aronson and Tim Lyons are both associate directors. And I think that between the three of us, we have a very complementary array of experiences, backgrounds, fields. Emma is a microbiologist and looks very closely at what we think is very important in terms of human health around there, looking at the microbiome and looking at how bacteria and other microorganisms may be affecting changes in the sea, as well as in people around the region. Tim Lyons, I think, is maybe a top-notch scientist in the area of the water and studies the water cycles, including things that many people are concerned about, like sulfide and sulfide emissions from the lake. And between the three of us, we've been navigating some recent tasks that this task force has been moving on to after the publication of that initial document. One of those has been this ongoing biannual Salton Sea Summit, which began in 2018 and relatively small compared to where it is now, and has continued more or less with some interruption, partially pandemic related. But we've been continuing it on since then every couple years. And in my opinion, is a really important forum that crosses audience types, demographics. We invite members of the community, we invite members of the press, policymakers, academics, of course, all to gather together to talk about the science, about the realities, both on the ground, in the water, in communities, and to have a time to put all these things together. As Patrick mentioned, the most recent one just occurred last month. I'll note that we're still in the process of putting together and sharing all of the output from this event, including recordings, which I'm working hard on finishing those up. These will be posted on the website at saltonseasummit.org. And so all of those materials will be available very soon, including things like the transcripts of Q&A and the recordings for any who might have missed that event. So this will all be available there. We had, I think, an interesting agenda that was split between very science-focused Friday sessions on water, air, and health. And then on Saturday, moving into more of the realm of policy, communities, projects. And so with this split, we tried to do something where the discussion on Saturday, ideally, we were hoping would be something that could be in response to and a reflection of some of the realities that we're finding in terms of the science. And that was the overall goal for the creation of this structure. As far as the Friday Science, I'm not going to go through all the nitty-gritty details. I'll mention again, though, that I'm hoping that by Monday at the latest, all of these sessions will be up online and available at the website you see down here, saltonseasummit.org. And so for more information, please do go there this weekend or early next week. It should be available, and you can catch up on anything that you might have missed or that you're more interested in. But very briefly, just as a 3-bullet point summary, what we're finding and what we've been putting together as a task force, I think, is the most cohesive narrative of some of the issues surrounding the Salton Sea that we've been able to put together ever. And I think that I say this with some humility because we have a lot to learn and there's still many, many questions to go. But in my opinion, we're reaching a point where many of these dots, which up until now had been kind of scattered, piecemeal, anecdotal, evidence focused, are really coming together in the form of observations, of data, of peer-reviewed science. I'll note, by the way, that my paper the manuscript that I presented during my session at the air session was just approved through peer review and will be appearing soon in Environmental Research Health. And so that will be available as well. I'll be putting that up on the site since there are questions about that. And very briefly, what we're finding is some new dimensions to Salton Sea issues. The heart of these changes and the heart of what we're looking at here is related to the nutrients flowing into the water. There has been a lot of research and a lot of new information coming together about the impacts of having this huge nutrient loading driving changes in the microbiome, by which we mean the microorganisms and the compounds that they process and release in the sea. And this has caused some really unique changes of state within that water. Very unique in terms of the region, and very unique even in terms of other inland seas and large lakes, which makes the Salton Sea, kind of special in some positive and not so positive ways as far as what's happening in that microbiome. We're finding that those compounds that are related to those huge amounts of nutrients and the microorganisms that feed on them can then move into the air. And there's been a number of compounds in particular that the David Lowe lab has been targeting as far as looking in the lab and in the chamber, how these impact the body, how these impact, they use mice as models for the human body, and that these compounds can emerge both from the dried lake bed, which has been a concern for decades, of course, as well as directly from the water itself, which is something that has been observed in other communities around large bodies of water, including the ocean and other large lakes. And that these compounds may, because of the properties they have, be particularly prone to getting concentrated in lake spray, as well as in dried out sediments around, which makes a very tricky challenge as far as getting good, effective mitigation strategies. And that those compounds may themselves be related to some of the many health problems that have been identified, that have been discussed, that have been seen through anecdotal evidence, through larger scale population studies around the sea. I'll note, I'm happy to discuss this with more questions, but I'll just note again that many more resources related to these findings will be available online. So please do check out for the session recordings, Q&A sessions, other content summaries that we'll be posting on the event site. And then I'll wrap up with just where we're going next. As a task force, we feel very strongly that science and action are not mutually exclusive, and in fact, for effective changes cannot be mutually exclusive. You need to keep your eyes open as you're moving forward in any particular direction. You need to continually check how things are going. Make sure that you're getting the changes that you expect and that you predicted when you first started action. And we believe that having effective science-informed policy is going to be a continual hand-in-hand process. And so one of our primary goals is to become a focal point for the science part of that partnership, and become a conduit for that science to policy flow that needs to happen if you want to have science-informed policy through our connections with key regional stakeholders, including the Salton Sea Authority. And I'm excited to be involved, both here and ongoing projects along with the SSA. We also are very committed to growing our network worldwide. These issues, as I mentioned, and as might stand to reason, are not only in the Salton Sea. These are things that many researchers all over the world are facing and have dealt with and seen consequences from in many different ways. And we want to form a kind of a network to tap into those, so that not everybody is reinventing the wheel when it comes to looking at mitigation strategies, looking at the science behind these changes. And we feel that we can serve that role as far as connecting the international network of researchers and academics. And then as part of this, of course, we're working right now very hard on finding long-term funding opportunities in the form of large-scale grants, other forms of funding, to sustain that critical research and to work side by side and hand in hand with policymakers and other stakeholders on finding these effective, informed actions moving forward. I'll wrap up there. Happy to take any questions. Thank you again for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Porter. I do appreciate it. I appreciate your presentation. I will say, before I turn it over to board comments, I was present on Friday in person. I did attend the Salton Sea Summit, and then on Saturday, I Zoomed the entire thing. So even my husband at the dinner was like, "What are you doing?" And yeah. So I appreciate that. Is there any other board comments?
Is it my understanding, Madam Chair, we would go through all four of the items first?
Well,
Okay.
for public comment, I'm gonna do public at the end, but if we would prefer to do board comments afterward, that's fine too. Want to do that?
I just thought maybe the board members might have questions.
Well, my only comment is I do appreciate the effort that was made. I watched Mr. Reyes's, watched and heard Mr. Reyes's comments a few times. Did appreciate his comments and the awareness that he was bringing to the Salton Sea. So I think it's a good opportunity to engage the community and then provide some information. So I do welcome the summit and the ability for it to be a catalyst to deal with these roundtable discussions.
And then actually, and then the only other odd question I had, and it's only because Mr. Porter, you did bring up about grant and getting funding. The Salton Sea Task Force that you're a part of, how do you get your funding? Is that all you see Riverside funding? Is that how that works for?
Yeah, up to this point, it's been largely in the form of individual researchers securing their own funding sources. So in the case of my work, that was funded in large part by philanthropic donation from a group that was committed to community-based science focused on human health. Other members of the task force have gotten their own funding sources from national or local level grants. We're working right now. I see that Emma Aronson is an attendee here and is called in. She's working very hard on putting together a large-scale center grant to the NSF, which would allow us to kind of, again, start putting things together and rowing all in the same direction, really focused on harnessing and synergizing members of the research community and local communities towards these larger picture goals. So up to this point, like many of the, before Marilyn Fogel started putting people together and working on this together, the funding story right now is kind of individual people pooling their, individual resources together. Our goal right now is to start moving in a more unified direction to finding a way to harness as a whole some of these larger funding sources.
Thank you, Will. And I will say I felt the event was very well attended.
Could I ask a
Thank you
question?
very much. Yeah, it was a labor of love. It was a lot of hard work, but I was
Do
really
you
happy.
have an estimate on how many people attended actually?
Yeah, we ended up with upwards of 300 folks
Wow.
that were that had signed up in some form. There was much fewer, of course, in attendance live. That auditorium has a max capacity of around 250. I think that Friday we ended up with just over 200 in attendance, and then it was slightly lower on Saturday for a number of reasons.
It's because I could Zoom and do my laundry and walk the
Yeah,
dogs
that
all
might
at
have
the
been it. I
same
think
time.
people
Will,
liked the
sorry.
idea of Zooming on the weekends.
Thank you.
I did have a question, Dr. Porter. I'm wondering what informs your research efforts. How do you decide and how do you prioritize the issues that you're researching around the sea? Who do you collaborate with? Who do you get direction from? And how do you decide this versus that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And this comes down to kind of my reasons for being in academia to begin with. We research what we want. And in part, that's constrained by what we can get funding for. We need to pay our students. We need to pay, we need to pay our groups. But in essence, we're inspired by the problems that we consider to be most important. In my case, when I was asked by Dr. Fogel about my interest in the region, it wasn't hard for me as an air quality scientist to look at this region and to look at the problems and see like, wow, this is a huge opportunity to try and shed some light on these air quality issues, these human health issues. And so I started right away of trying to address those, thinking about this question of dust, thinking about this question of what's impacting people's health. And my path kind of evolved a little bit based on what data was available, what data was not available. As many know, there's been a lot of uncertainties and unknowns about what's in the dust. And so my initial work was trying to work around those limitations. And the work that I presented at the Salton Sea was kind of addressing that from the backwards direction to get around that by just looking at how people were affected when dust was arriving from different directions. And if you look at the recording, or if you remember from Friday, that was, I think, the novelty of that particular approach, which was driven by what we could do with the data we have available. And so in large part, I know that many of the researchers are trying to apply their particular skill sets, their particular tools, whether that's mouse chambers, whether that's measurements in the water, whether that's measurements and observations or models in the air, to the questions that matter to people and policymakers. And so, but in large part, what I love about my job is that nobody tells me what to research. I get to choose that. And that's, I think, something that makes the academic partnership particularly powerful, in that we can choose to research or to go in whatever directions are most needed. And again, that's our goal as a task force, is to fill that role for those who are making the decisions and most able to make decisions around the Salton Sea.
Well, thank you for choosing the Salton Sea as one of your.
My pleasure. I think it's
Madam
really
President,
special.
I do have a question for Dr. Porter. I'm just curious. Unfortunately, I was traveling and could not attend the summit, but I heard good things about it. But was there in developing and presenting the research for the event, was there anything materially different that you were able to discover that we didn't already know about the air quality and its impact on the residents that would, if it was therefore something being newly discovered, that would lead to some remedy for air quality mitigation efforts?
Yeah, not to toot my own horn, but I think that there's been some massive updates compared to where we were in 2022 when the previous summit was held, across the board. I'll mention again that the full recordings can be found on the site. I'm going to get those up by Monday. I've committed to that. But some of, just to name a few, some major updates include the biggest takeaway message here is that we have what we believe to be one of the key kind of constituents on a molecular compound level of what may be affecting residents most directly. And this is something that had been kind of hypothesized and bandied over about what it might be. Is it metals? Is it all these different constituents? And pointing the finger in this case at an organic endotoxin is very new. This is something that, to my knowledge, had not been strongly looked at in previous literature, in previous papers, in previous conversations about health. And that this being a byproduct of some of the organisms that live in the water. And this is a combination of work driven by Dr. David Lowe, who has given a talk here in the past, Dr. Emma Aronson, who's here, I think, calling in, and others in their teams, Tim Lyons as well, who have been working very hard to understand how this combination of nutrient loading, high salt concentrations, the changes in the microbiome, as well as the emissions in the form of directly from the water surface or from the dust around the perimeter of the lake, may be going into communities. I think that's something that's, in terms of the major takeaway message, as far as like the slide that I was showing, that's brand new. And that's something that's hot off the press, either very recently published or in the process of being published, that we wanted to make sure is on the table to discuss. Because it's of our opinion, we all agree that any serious strategy for addressing the issues around the Salton Sea need to take into consideration not just the water quantity, but its quality as well. And that's not just in the form of salinity and the salts, but those nutrients. And that we're of the opinion that, and this is another thing that's kind of a boat rocker here, that even if water levels were maintained at their highest point, if those nutrients were allowed to continually flow in the state that they are now, we would very likely still be seeing some of these same health effects, perhaps even more so. And so that's something that had not been on the table. And I think that's a major change as far as understanding that system of the Salton Sea environmentally, as well as what mitigation strategies would be effective. And there are some. I don't want to make this a doom and gloom. There are ways that we can plan our mitigation efforts that will deal with these issues, but they have to be done informed by these scientific realities.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
I like ending on a positive note.
Mm-hmm.
Me too. Okay. If there's no further questions, can we move to item 2?
Yeah. Mr. Cohen? Good morning.
Thanks. Good morning. Let me see if I can share my screen here. Can you all see that?
Yes.
Excellent. Thanks.
There you
So first I want to thank Madam President and members of the board for inviting me to give a quick overview of my still in progress draft Salton Sea air quality assessment. So I do want to emphasize that this is still a work in progress. Very quickly about the Pacific Institute. We're a nonprofit based in Oakland, California, doing a lot of work on water and water quantity and water conservation in particular. So the air quality is a bit of a stretch for me, but there's a clear link between declining flows in Salton Sea. And a lot of this work was really prompted by a lot of what we see in the press about playa dust and the toxicity or potential toxicity of playa dust. So the idea here was to put this in context. So the general overview is to really synthesize in a lot of the recent research on air quality in the Salton Sea region as a whole, not just the Salton Sea and recently exposed playa, and to help inform air quality management decisions in the region and for the Salton Sea Management Program. This work is being funded by the Bureau of Reclamation. Originally, we were hoping to get this report out by the end of this year, as these things tend to go. it's probably not going to be until March or so that the report is finalized. So the report really builds off the Salton Sea Library. We did an extensive lit review to kick off the report. This is a public library. There's more than in the library, including a lot of peer-reviewed journals, as well as conference proceedings, book chapters, reports, dissertations, theses. So it's open to the public, and encourage people to take a look at this. And as we were looking at this, we used 2014 as a basis of comparison, because that was the year we produced or published our most recent report called Hazardous Toll, looking at the economic impacts of no action at the Salton Sea. So just at that time, I really identified the lack of attention paid to air quality and public health, or regional public health in particular. And you can see that before 2014 and after 2014, there's a real difference in the amount of research that's been published on these particular topics. And Dr. Porter mentioned this. There's a lot of interest from UC Riverside and a number of other institutions looking at these topics, and that helped us start our research. So one of the defining factors here is, what's the study area? So this graphic you see in front of you here shows the watershed of the Salton Sea in the heavy black line. And working in water, I like watersheds because it's a clear delineation of a study area. Air basins are less clear. So in the grayer shading here, you can see Imperial County as a whole. It's the Imperial County Air Pollution Control District. And then the Coachella Valley portion of the South Coast Air Quality Management District. And these two districts form the regulatory air basin, which is called the Salton Sea Air Basin. But you can see that it doesn't really capture or fully reflect what's happening in the Salton Sea region, because it extends all the way to the Colorado River, and then it extends into some of the mountain regions as well. So using data from that gives an indication of what's happening in the region, but it's not definitive. So we looked at a couple other ways of creating a study area. One of them is the old Lake Cahuilla, or the biggest extent of the former lake here, and that's in this kind of green hatched area. And that's all former lake bed playa. So you can use that as one determination of what the air basin is. What we chose to do is use kind of a colloquial definition of an air basin that's defined by CARB, which defines an air basin as a region that has similar meteorological and geographic conditions, and where emissions within the region will stay primarily within that region under low wind conditions. That said, and this is CARB again, air pollution can be transported between air basins, and that transport can be significant at times. So here's some of the complexity of the air basin, is that under low wind conditions, there's not a lot of dust kicked up. But under high wind conditions, we can see a lot of dust being brought in from different regions, but these all impact people living in the Salton Sea region as a whole. So there's a number of factors that affect air quality. There's the physical and the chemical and biological properties of the individual components of the particles in particular that we heard from Dr. Porter. And then there's different phase chemistry. So there's solids and liquids, both of which can be particles. And then there's also gases, hydrogen sulfide, ozone also can affect public health. And then there's stationary versus mobile sources. So we often think about playa as a stationary source, but there are a lot of mobile sources contributing to air quality, or to adverse air quality in the region. And then the other key factor here, and this is, I don't want to harp on Dr. Porter's specialty, but transport. So how are these particles moving, or how are these gases moving? How long are they suspended or entrained in the atmosphere? How far do they go? Where are they coming from? So these are all some of the challenging factors affecting air quality in the region. So this table is just an inventory of the PM 2.5 and PM 10 emissions just in Imperial County from 2012. And I use 2012 because that's the base year, the inventory year, when Imperial County spent a lot of money going out to do a real inventory. Subsequent, there's periodic updates to these numbers, and those are modeled estimates, but this is the real physical inventory year. And you can see from on the far right, or the upper right corner, that PM10, some 73% is fugitive windblown dust. Some of that's from the Salton Sea Playa, some of that's from surrounding deserts, or from unpaved roads, or other things like that. And then the 2.5, you can see towards the bottom left that the majority of that is from fires. So there are, again, a host of different factors contribute to this. This image is from IID's consultant from Formation. They put out an excellent annual report, perhaps the most comprehensive annual report, which allows for some tracking of how these trends develop over time. And this really shows some of the most emissive areas. And again, it's this Western desert extending into San Diego County, producing some of the dust that affects the region. So on the right side, there's different values there in terms of total PM10 emissions. You can see from the Western desert, some 30,000 tons. And from the playa, it's only about 1% of that value. And then again, comparing this to the inventory I just showed you, which is about 106 or 107,000 tons per year, or in 2012, the amount of playa dust from the 2023 estimate is just a tiny fraction of that. And then I think it was one of your recent Salton Sea Authority board meetings was concluded a little early to go to a CVAG meeting talking about some of the local dust in Coachella Valley. And this is just an image taken from earlier this year showing some of the coarser particulates providing real visibility challenges. And I think even a year prior to that, there was a fatality attributed to low visibility from blowing dust. And this again was not Salton Sea dust, but was attributed to the remnants of Tropical Storm Hillary, which laid down a lot of alluvial sediment, which has been kicking up a lot of dust in the region. This is really looking at PM 2.5 and just showing some of the agricultural burns. Again, this image is just from Imperial County, but you can see hundreds of agricultural or permitted agricultural burns throughout the valley contributing to PM 2.5 emissions. This is an early draft of an image we're starting to compile of the different contributing factors to air quality pollutants. There's a number of animal feedlot operations in Imperial County. There's a lot of solid waste facilities in both counties. And then we're trying to compare that where people living, where are these communities, how far are these from some of the schools? And then on the other end of that, on the public health end of that, where are the healthcare facilities? And if you look at this, the red dots are the healthcare facilities, could be clinics, could be hospitals, just a general categorization. But they're of course concentrated in the cities where most of the people live. But if you look around the Salton Sea, there's a real dearth of healthcare facilities, which contributes to these public health challenges. So these have all been stationary sources. Just a quick look at some of the mobile sources. So this is looking at diesel emissions, which again is contributing to PM 2.5. And you can see that there's still on the order of 150 tons per year of PM 2.5 just from diesel emissions. And then looking at some of the hospitalization rates, which is just a kind of a proxy for what these public health challenges might be. So this is using data from the state's healthcare database, looking at hospitalization rates for children. And Imperial County, you can see back in 2010, was almost double the state average, but is now down closer to the state average. And then Sacramento is just included in there for reference. You can see the Sacramento is more or less held steady over this this time period and is now actually higher than the state average. 2020 is probably affected by COVID and the pandemic, and either people not taking their children to the hospital for asthma conditions or being characterized as for other reasons. So let me just end on some of the mitigation efforts. And on the left, you can see that the state's vegetation enhancement project out near Salton City, and the state's offering data suggesting that it's some 90% reduction in dust emissions, PM10 emissions from playa in that area. But as I pointed out, that playa emission is just a tiny fraction of the total air quality burden for people living in the region. And typically, I'm a big favor of source control, but given the huge number of different factors contributing to public health challenges, it may be that exposure control is more appropriate. And this is an image stolen directly from Dr. Porter's webpage, showing some of the air quality filters that he's been working on helping to distribute throughout the region. And it may be given again, this burden, this air quality burden, that focusing some of these mitigation efforts on where people are breathing in these various contaminants may be a more cost-effective strategy than trying to track and address all the different sources that are contributing to it. Thanks.
That it? Was that the completion of your presentation, Michael?
That was it.
Okay, it just disappeared. I wanted to make sure it didn't collapse.
These Zoom presentations, I'm
Okay,
talking
great.
to the board. I'm never even clear if people are actually hearing me. So the silence is troubling, but I assume you heard it.
That was perfect,
did.
Mr. Cohen. I do appreciate it. And then can you also, will you email those slides to Patrick so we can pass them on?
Yeah, happy to do that.
Thank you. And so one of the things that I was amazed at your slide about Sacramento, about pediatric asthma rates being higher in Sacramento than the Imperial Valley. That was a very interesting takeaway, just because everybody talks about how high the asthma rates are here. So thank you. Does anybody else have any other comments, board comments? No? Well, thank you very much. I appreciate the information. And
Thanks.
then we're not even going to get into emissions across the border, Calexico coming across the gas, right? We'll be here all day. So. All right, can we move on then to item 3?
I just, item 3 is really just last month, at our last meeting, we had a presentation of the monitoring implementation plan, and I received notice that they're in the process of updating that plan for 2025. And so I just requested the state to provide whatever information was appropriate for the public. I know that Miguel has been distributing that information broadly, but I just, I think that it's part of the data gathering effort to understand some of these questions and concerns. There is a link to the form for submission. There is a meeting coming up soon. I don't know if you'd like to provide a few comments on the upcoming MIP process.
Thank you, Miguel.
Yes, so hi everybody, my name is Miguel Hernandez, Public Affairs Officer with the Salton Sea Management Program. And as Mr. O'Dowd just mentioned, we have an upcoming meeting for our monitoring implementation plan, annual work plan. What this is a collaborative effort with multiple entities on a voluntary basis to send us all of the work that they're doing in regards to the Salton Sea, if it's air quality, water quality, socioeconomics, all kinds of aspects that are being evaluated by the different entities that work around the Salton Sea, not just state, but open to anybody that's working in the Salton Sea region. If it's academia, if it's local CBOs, if it's a school, if it's just community groups getting together, trying to find data or trying to find information in the Salton Sea. This is the opportunity to help us gather all that information that's happening in the Salton Sea, all those efforts that everybody's doing, but not all of us are aware of. So we're trying to, in a way, compile all that information. We're not getting data sets per se, or the specific, let's say, air quality specific, let's say PM. We're not collecting any of that. More so, it's just a compilation of this programs exist out there, and these are the lead implementers for those specific programs. So we have an upcoming meeting on the 19th next week. It's going to be an online meeting, of course, with interpretation available to learn more about the MIP work plan, and also learn more about this voluntary submission form that's out there on a Google form, actually. So it's actually also a pretty simple form to fill in. But also the team is always available to provide any additional details as of how to submit the form, or if people would like to add more details that are not captured in that form, we're always open to receiving that additional data. And I'll check in with my colleague Yvonne, see if she wants to add anything more. Yeah.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Yvonne Wolhoff, and I am part of the Salton Sea Management Program team. If you don't know me, I work for the California Department of Water Resources, and I don't always get to come in person. So I thought given the topic of air quality, it might be a great opportunity to share something that the state is doing in the context of gathering data. As you, not Patrick, Michael just showed on the screen, there was a picture of one of our vegetation enhancement project sites. And related to that effort, we have 21 air quality monitoring stations around the sea, and we're adding more. The intent of these the air quality monitoring stations is to gather information to inform project planning, as well as monitor the effectiveness of our projects. And there, Mike was mentioning the effectiveness rate at one of our project sites. The other goal of our air quality monitoring stations is to complement the network that IID has put in place with formation that was also referenced. And I have happy news here that we've been able to secure some funding to translate this data that we're collecting and make it a public facing data set on our website. So when that is ready, we would be happy to come back to the board and present that website, the data, and what we're finding as we're monitoring our projects around the Salton Sea. So I just wanted to put a little plug for that and hopefully get on a future agenda here.
I have a couple comments, Madam Chair.
Go ahead.
Yeah, one of the things I've always appreciated about Patrick is, his passion for the sea and really understanding it from a public health perspective. I've always look at it as well from a restoration and preservation of habitat, but obviously public health is something that's incredibly important as well. The watermark for me has always been Owens Lake and the surveillance that they provided in addressing some of the issues and the leadership behind LADWP and what they showed in terms of providing the surveillance. And we talk about air monitoring stations and how important they are, and they're very important. But I think we have a deficit when it comes to the amount of monitors that are available along the shoreline in comparison to Owens Lake. But what's also a challenge is they're just not communicating with each other, whether it's NGOs, IIDs, or the states. And so it's a great opportunity to have you here and maybe pursue a future agenda topic. But any suggestions that you may have or may come from the Department of Water Resources on what we can do to maybe increase our footprint when it comes to the air monitoring stations, and most importantly, so that they all can communicate and then put it into maybe one, what I call a sausage factory, as opposed to several other sausage factories, so we can get that data like Mr. Cohen presented. Any just general thoughts about maybe improving the amount of surveillance on the sea, Salton Sea, that's maybe equivalent in terms of scale as we look at Owens Lake as past history?
I think what's interesting about the data collection effort from my perspective is early on when I got hired before we started any of the projects at the sea. And one of the things that I worked on was putting together the Dust Suppression Action Plan, and the team at IID hosted us and shared with us how you're collecting data. And it was really helpful because that gave us an opportunity to figure out, okay, well, how can we complement that so you can have our data sets be meaningful when you're looking at the data together, right? So it's either we're collecting the data in the same way, or it's additive where we might be filling a gap in for each other. Like we might leave off collecting pie swirl data, which is the one data set, and we would be collecting another one to make that picture a little bit more whole. So then we have other data collection efforts in the sea, and what they do is they give you a different lens on different aspects that impact air quality. For example, our air quality monitors would measure wind speed at a lower height because we're trying to get an idea of how is that dust moving closer to the ground level, more so than maybe like a regulatory monitor, because we're focused on the exposed lake bed as it relates to our projects and wanting to keep the dust down. We don't want it to move as far. We don't want those big particles to bounce and become small and then become emissive. So those are the things that we're looking at. So I think that in some cases we can have them be cohesive, but there is value that there is a little bit of a different spin to it. And then as far as increasing our network, what's been really helpful to us is getting site access. And you probably hear us harp on this at the state. It comes up every time we talk, I feel like it. So we don't own a lot of land around the sea. So for us to put those air quality monitors out, and those stations measure various things. we need to get site access. Sometimes we even need to get permission to use the road that gets us to the parcel that we have access to. And that sometimes can be a limiting factor for us. So we're increasing the network. As we get more site access, more air quality monitors go on site, as long as the state and those who fund our program think it's valuable.
Thanks for pointing the finger back at IED. She's
For
good.
some side
Hey, now
access.
she said side access. All right, let's talk.
Not
Okay, hold on.
Come on.
All right, now you're weaponizing Mr. Reyes right here. All right, let's talk. Okay, let's talk. Let's talk now.
Oh. Uh,
So, go ahead.
Oh, no,
No,
go
go ahead.
finish. John's after you. Go ahead.
All right, so again, we definitely want to be a good partner and a good actor when it comes to site access, and that's an incredible responsibility. And I can speak for Director Dockstader as well, that we definitely want to make it convenient. We want to be nimble. We want to be efficient as we do access sites. And the testament to that is SCH. So dealing with SCH, 4,000 acres, supersizing it with another 720, took a little bit longer than it should have, but at least there's a treasure map there that we can use to address site access. But you hit the nail on the head. And the only reason why I really want to double down on the surveillance, especially around the air stations, is really to point a finger and determine that those asthma rates are bona fide and related to the air quality, so that we can pursue the policy, so that we can pursue the California laws and the appropriations to address those public health issues. So I would love to see the Salton Sea Authority double down on our advocacy efforts in pursuing policy, appropriations, and state law in improving our surveillance on the sea, so that we can truly address those public health issues. My last comment, if I may, is you do have a little bit of money, and that's under the QSA JPA. So can I inquire if the state's making inquiries into those monies in terms of helping our surveillance efforts and maybe augmenting or supplementing your current budget deficits or any other challenges around funding? Is that an option, or is that a door that we can kick in terms of funding opportunities for restoration of habitat or public health issues?
I'll speak to my knowledge, and
Okay.
it could be limited on this front. Just put that caveat out there. We do coordinate with IID staff as it relates to the mitigation efforts under the QSA that has the air quality component to it. Ours is complementary, and our funding source is coming from a different place for our projects. But the intent is that we collaborate and work together, and that's what we have been doing.
Very safe response. If you have trouble with that, but call Gina and we can maybe help you out. But thank you, ma'am.
I don't know if we're dipping into the QSA funds, so
Well,
it's not on my budget tracking. So,
all right.
yeah.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Question?
Yes. Thank you, Gina. First of all, thank you. Super helpful. And I really appreciate the work that you guys do, particularly because it seemed to be on the ground kind of work out in the community, in the dirt. I empathize with the issue of access, but you mentioned the 21 monitors. So is there a number that it should be? Should it be?
That's a really good question. But our approach to date has been trying to think about how to say it. We've been able to get projects on the ground. That step happened first. And it was really because we are constantly trying to catch up on our acre milestones that are under the water board order. So, but then we wanted to know, okay, well, if we're doing this, how is it performing? We need to track this. And that's where it came from, right? And we knew that IID was collecting data. We have some spots at the northern end of the sea, closer to Eastern Coachella Valley, that we placed those monitors there because of community feedback. They were concerned that there wasn't as much data being collected there. So we thought, okay, we're going to mobilize some to the north and we're going to monitor what we have. Now moving forward is whenever we get site access and we know we're going to plan a project, to the extent that we can get them out there, we want to get them out in advance of the project so we could have pre-site data versus what we can observe after the project goes in. So it has a little bit of a different twist now, but it's really driven by if we have site access, because we'd have to prioritize, do we think this project site is feasible? We'd go out, see if we can get the land access. We do some surveys and think, okay, the project we have in mind would be suitable for this location. And at that point, we could put the air quality monitors out.
Understood. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, and then just before we conclude, Yvonne, I just have to have a little tiny comeback from the IID that if DWR would accept our blanket terms for on-site access, you would be granted on-site access so much faster.
I'll look into those
Instead of,
blanket
instead of
terms.
changing terms, yeah, then it takes a little bit longer to go through the channel. So thank you for that.
Thank you for your time. Thank you for letting me squeeze in here.
You're welcome. Are we off to item 4?
So all of that to lead up to a memo, which is included in your board packet, which is just a continuation of this conversation that's been going on for some time. I think what I want to, first of all, my sense is this is a concern, not a crisis. And I think we should manage it as such. I think that we should deal with it responsibly and with the science and the professional resources that are available. I'm tremendously grateful for all the work that the state, the DWR and the Natural Resources Agency is doing to address the challenges around the sea, to communicate with the people in the region. But we still don't know what we don't know. And I'm, based on the work that UCR has done, based on what they're doing at Owens Lake, it just seems that a better framework could be developed, working with the state as our partners, working with the universities, working with the local air boards, working with local stakeholders like Comite Civico, who does their own monitoring, to make sure that we understand what the magnitude of risk is, how it's being quantified, how it's being mitigated, what people need to do to protect themselves in the meantime. Owens Lake, I had the opportunity to go up there a couple weeks ago for my second tour of duty, and the first time I went up there, it was with the Water Foundation, and so a lot of it was focused on water. This time it was with a group from the Great Salt Lake, and they were concerned about community engagement and discussion with the community. There is a facility there; it's an information center that talks about the history of Owens Lake and the challenges at Owens Lake and what's being done to address the challenges at Owens Lake. And just little things like that, I think that if they were available on a consolidated basis where everybody was speaking into the information flow that people was receiving about their concerns, where they can express their concerns and where they can be filtered and responded to in a responsible way, I think those things would go a long way to addressing broad public concerns. And to me, that's our biggest enemy, is what people don't know. And I think if people knew that the professionals and the institutions who are responsible for understanding and mitigating the challenges around the sea are doing their jobs, then everything else, including economic development, including expanded ecosystem restoration, would move forward in a very efficient manner. So all I've done in this group is really to ask for the board's continued support and direction, to work with the member agencies, work with the state, work with the universities to try and suss out what this framework might look like, what kind of resources might be necessary other than the resources that are already being used to accomplish this, and put this in place so that it can inform the discussions that are taking place on the Colorado River, that it can inform the work being done by the Corps and the state and the authority on the feasibility study, so that long-term project can take into consideration some of these concerns. So I appreciate the Michael Cohen's presentation today. This problem isn't isolated to the sea itself, but the sea is part of the problem. I appreciate Dr. Porter's work and the long work that Dr. Lowe and UCR and the passion that they've had for the sea and the people around the sea. We just need to bring this through the funnel, through the tip, so that we can digest it and come up with a sustainable, durable solution for the sea and the region and the people around it. And so I'm just looking for a direction and support from the board to continue in this manner.
So Madam Chair, just for a point of order here, so at the end of your memo in regards to framework, there is a recommendation there. Is that what you're seeking direction on, Mr. O'Dowd?
That is what I'm seeking direction or agreement from the board on, correct?
And I do see DWR and then USACE feasibility. So those, you're just asking that the authority continue to work with these folks in regards to addressing the issues outlined in the memo.
I just want to make sure that we are on the right track. that we're moving in the right direction. And my expectation is that at our next meeting in January, my hope is that in our next meeting in January, I can bring to this board a more substantive proposal that will probably not have a detailed budget for what a program like this will look like, but what a framework might look like and how it might be developed over time. I've had discussions with Dr. Porter and others about how to evaluate who is participating in the conversation and how to get the input from the different concerned stakeholders. I just am also convinced that the regular meetings of the Salton Sea Authority Board of Directors are a unique opportunity to communicate with the public on a regularly scheduled basis on these issues that they are constantly concerned about. We, in the update on the North Lake project, we had 2 community outreach events, and we presented the project and where we're at and where we're going. But the most heartfelt issues and concerns of the community were not the project we're building at North Shore. They were concerns about how it's affecting their health and safety. And we assured them that we can walk and chew gum at the same time, right? So that is a priority, and it will be a priority until people are convinced that highly qualified professionals in this space are working on addressing their concerns and they don't have to worry about it. That's a lot of work. It's a tall task, but I think it's something that is fully within the realm of the Salton Sea Authority's purview and something that the people in the region are due.
But Mr. O'Dowd, just in regards to a space.
That's been a longer answer than you were looking.
No, it's all right. I just need, so are we looking at policy, legislation, and appropriation when you say you're working with these folks?
All of the above.
All the above?
Yeah.
Madam Chair, I have no objection.
I have no,
Okay,
no issues either.
okay. Well, I think you have it.
Okay, so as part of that and in conjunction with that, at our last board meeting, the board graciously allowed me to reallocate some budget resources to work on our communication strategy, to help educate and inform the public, to work with our advocates, and to work and to utilize most efficiently the resources of our member agencies in that effort. And so over the course of the last 6 weeks, we've been working with Tara from Tara, what is your last name? Malali. There you
Okay,
go.
I wanna pause for 1 second. Are we moving on to?
I thought that's
Item
what
D?
you were doing, yes. I'm sorry.
Actually, no, I believe we have public comments, if you
Fair.
don't
I
mind.
apologize.
Okay, that's okay. You're welcome, Mr. Reyes.
Thank you. I did the process. I signed the form.
Yes, you did.
Eric Reyes again. This time as not just a resident, but also director of Los Amigos de la Comunidad. Obviously, we're actively involved in all matters, environmental health, water, air quality, and deeply engaged in the Salton Sea. It kind of worries me that one, you keep talking about, getting that information. Christian Torres came here from Comité Cívico at your behest to talk about the air monitors, yet we have not seen that information come together. As we said, Miguel now is talking about putting all that together. That's needed now, quickly. The emphasis has been on PM 2.5 and PM 10, but we're seeing after the Salton Sea Summit that there's so much more that needs to be found and given information for. I have been participating in the Salton Sea Summit with the UC system for the last 3 or 4 years. I moderated and also as a panelist. And I remember when Dr. Lowe 2 years ago, when I was a moderator, gave his presentation, excellent presentation on what he's finding. And his findings were one, we know there's impacts, but he said something that has stood with me since this time. He says, we were ecstatic to find that there are impacts that we thought. He goes, at first, what we should have been was horrified. And that stayed with me because we're talking about, even though they're doing it on another issue there, mice and so on, this is human health impacts we're talking about, and it's growing. Through my work now with being able to go to these conferences that they've been able to ask me that for some time, I have been, our organization now will be working with different professors on different projects. One on storm prediction, how to make the storm predictions better for the public and how to get the information out. That's the main point. How do we get the information to the people? just as Patrick stated right now. That's the key point. You can have as much information as you want, but if you don't get it to the right people at the right time, it's useless at many times. And then two, we'll be working on air quality monitors around the sea that is picking everything else up, heavy metals and everything else that we saw at the Salton Sea conference, just how critical that is. People were amazed to find that the water itself is causing air quality issues of the things that they talked about. But how many people were 300? It sounds great. That's fantastic, but a lot more people are impacted that don't have no clue as to what's going on. Those of us are involved are scared and want to get that word out. How do we all work together to get that message out is of critical importance. And to that end, Michael Cohen from Pacific Institute and I spoke together that had been so much emphasis on the Riverside. We will be hosting a Salton Sea conference in May here in conjunction with Imperial Valley College. Michael is giving us technical support from his east. So we want the Salton Sea authorities there, just as Patrick was there, the IID, just as IID was at Palm Desert. And we want those presentations and try to work together to get this information out. But I cannot emphasize enough how this Salton Sea authority, now you have I was with State Senator Padilla last night in San Diego. He's still working out the kinks out of his conservancy. How is that going to work? I think that's the thing that you guys need to work quickly on. How is that going to work? Just more bureaucracy, and nothing gets done. And I've stated, I have a sense of urgency, and I want to see that from these agencies that work together. And even if you work individually, I want to see sense of urgency. Obviously, I've been after the IID to have more urgency in everything it does with the sea. And I hope everyone takes it to heart. It's like I text Mr. Cardenas after he graciously gave me his phone number for the first time. Right now, it's business, not personal. Don't take it personal. We all have we all have the same goal to make our community better, make it more environmentally and human health safety together. And I think that's what we miss at times. Thank you.
Mr. Reyes, before you finish, do you have a date? Do you have dates in May?
Yeah, May 8th, Thursday, May 8th is a tentative date. So
Thank you.
we're putting everything out currently to get that together.
Okay.
Are
Thank
you
you.
requesting a sponsorship letter, Director D?
Yeah.
Thank you. And before we move on, can we now go to maybe, unless there's other comments in the building, maybe I know we have comments online. Do we want to hear from,
Tom Sefton.
yeah. Tom, are you there?
Thank you for the unmute. Appreciate the opportunity. I have a question for anyone with UCR that's still on. Michael Cohen may know something about it too. I appreciated the opportunity to attend both days of the summit, learned a lot from it, and you had a very important story to tell, and one that is really changes everything on the ground that we have understood in the past. And my question is, how soon will you have data to differentiate whether the bacterial endotoxins are getting into shoreline communities mostly directly on sea spray or mostly attached to dust particles and carried into the communities that way? I know there was a small poster session about a project going in that direction. How soon do you think the community can begin to have some data on what the primary source is of the bacterial endotoxins? Thank you very much. And I'll just add, we extend an invitation to everybody on the Salton Sea Authority board and to everyone in the community to come out to Desert Shores this weekend and help us plant some trees. It will be a demonstration of the concept of using rows of trees as dust mitigation. And we invite you to come and plant some trees. We will provide free burritos. It is Saturday, 3715 Capri Lane in Desert Shores, California, the south end of Capri Lane. And we invite you all, please bring a shovel. Thank you. 9 o'clock.
Thank you very much, Mr. Septon. I appreciate that. Do we have time to let Michael respond? Mr. Cohen, can,
I think Will Porter is maybe available.
Yeah,
Oh,
if it's
oh,
okay,
well.
I'd be happy to respond.
please do.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Tom. And thanks for your interest and your ongoing participation. I know that you've been a real important voice in Salton Sea issues for a long time. So it's great to have you comment in here. Yeah, you raise what is our current top priority. As far as in my group, understanding these results and then pinning them down to the emissions mechanism and the particle type is my top priority right now as far as Salton Sea research is concerned. We have a number of collaborators, including Jenna Herbst was one of the folks who had a poster out there who has a proposal in to get funding to do that research that would help us to answer that very question. Realistically speaking, we don't have that moving at the moment. And so that's still a work in progress. I am hopeful that, if we're thinking on kind of like summit pattern schedules, I'm hopeful that by the next summit, which is 2 years out, it's not super soon, that we'll have those results that will be able to answer that kind of question. And so ideally speaking, we'd be able to secure some funding. We'd be able to get that research moving over the next year. And then that research would take place. We'd probably get some preliminary results soon after that, but then we would have to analyze and process and validate. And so my optimistic hope is that by the time the next summit comes around in a couple of years, we'll have those results finalized, maybe in submission in press that we can share with everybody.
Thank you very much. Let us know if you need a site to do some
Cool.
monitoring. We have access.
That is so awesome. Yeah, I often get questions from researchers who are hoping to find some access to put up instruments, and I'll definitely keep your name in mind for that.
We
If
can
you have burritos on hand, that would be even better. But
yeah, we could do we'll definitely do burritos on Saturday, and maybe we'll have you in other times,
All right.
and you'll get immediate access.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Tom.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Porter, this is just a FYI. We're supposed to do lunch. Don't forget next time you're on the north side of south side of the sea. But
I haven't forgotten. It's on my notes. Next time that I'm down in Imperial, I'll drop you a line for sure.
Oh, good. I wrote it down again too to reach out. Okay,
Thank you very much.
On Saturday.
Yeah, I know. I got to look at my schedule. I know I did.
This weekend, unfortunately, I'm hosting my folks. They're coming down to stay with us for the weekend, so I won't be able to come out this time. But I will be. I will be down there probably within the next month or so, and I'll drop you a line for sure. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. Is there any more? Do we have any more comments online? Do we have Taylor Unsicker? I hope I pronounced.
Nope.
No.
Good.
And what happened to Emma? She's gone. She had her hand raised like forever.
She did.
She did. I actually have her question, and it was one that I forgot to ask earlier. Is it okay if I ask a question? Am I allowed to as a panelist?
You have 3 minutes. Go.
All right.
No.
Awesome. The question that Emma wanted to ask, and it was related to what I was mentioning about her NSF Center proposal efforts. We're putting together, right now, I just got an email about some necessary edits that I need to work on tonight. And we're interested in putting together a large cohort of partners focused on this topic of Salton Sea research. Emma was interested, and I, of course, am also very interested about what type of mechanism. Is it possible that we could get SSA support, not in the form of financial support or anything like that? Would it be possible to include SSA as a collaborating organization in our efforts to secure this type of funding? Is that something that we would have time for on a short turnaround basis? What would that mechanism look like? And there wouldn't need to be anything tangible exchanged, just interest in supporting that effort.
I can talk with you offline about
Okay.
that. But
That
I think
sounds great.
It leads perfectly into our next.
Awesome. Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Oh, does that conclude our online comments, Lisa?
It does.
We're good. Okay. Moving on.
So with all of that we've just discussed, community engagement, education, outreach, advocacy is critical to the success of everything that we're doing. At our last board meeting, the authority board allowed the reclassification of certain funds for the engagement of CV strategies. To look at our communications plan, to look at what our member agencies are doing in the communications and advocacy space, and to come back to this board with a recommended longer term strategy for utilizing those resources most efficiently. So to address all the things that we've talked about today, including advocating for resources, including educating the public. Tara Mullally with CV Strategies has been on the case for about 6 weeks now, and I just asked her to come in today for a brief update. We are early in the process, so hopefully this will not take very long, but she'll be reporting at all of our meetings going forward. So.
Thank you so much for having me here today. I was really excited to present some of the progress that we've made and talk a little bit more about what we're really doing and where we're really headed. So just to kind of establish some initial communication goals, because I know that this can feel very ambiguous and not very action oriented when you're saying, oh, we're just going to keep talking about it. This is actually a lot more than that. It's about really identifying the nexus between all of the agendas of the member agencies, identifying some really key priorities through this messaging process, and then driving legislative, regulatory, and community activation through messaging, because that is often the most successful way in which to do that. We'll also be identifying a lot of communication resources that are currently available amongst all of our lovely member agencies. We've already started that process. In fact, we just met with the Torres Martinez Indians and CVWD in the last couple of weeks, and we'll go over that. And I've got some initial findings. So to just kind of go over the overall approach, what we're looking to do is assess the things that are currently available, the current understandings that exist, where we are as member agencies, and also identify some of our additional stakeholder groups. So when we're talking about, you know, Los Amigos over there, de Comunidades, when we're talking about Community, when we're talking about all of our, not just the member agencies, but those who have a stake in this, the Salton Sea Action Committee, those kinds of organizations, really identifying who our partners might look like, and what they might bring to the table as well. We're also meeting with every single member agency for at least half an hour to go over what resources may be available, or what concerns, what things are kind of brewing, and what their perspective is on the Salton Sea. I mean, you say what's the problem with the Salton Sea, and you get a million different answers. So what we're trying to do is identify what that really looks like in a way that we can continue to consistently communicate it over time. From there, we'll develop a plan of it, not a plan of attack, but a plan of moving forward in advancement. We'll call it that instead. And really identifying what tools we need, how we're going to move forward, and what will be most effective. Then we'll implement those, and we'll continue to do evaluations throughout the entire process to make sure that, you can say you have a really great plan, you can think it's a really great plan, and when you put it into action, you may need to veer slightly left. And we want to make sure that we are active in that process and not just relying on the work that we've done before. This initial situational assessment is about creating a space for clear communication. We've worked with the Salton Sea Authority staff, so in every one of my meetings, Patrick is definitely with me, helping to lead me through that conversation as I basically drink from a fire hose with all of the new information and everybody's thoughts and opinions. We're also, as I said, we met with the Torres Martinez Desert Kuya Indians and CVWD. Meetings with Riverside County and IID are actually already scheduled. And then Imperial County, we're currently working on calendaring. So just an update there. We'll be assessing current communication channels, having some really candid input in those meetings, as we've already had. And we'll be evaluating all of the existing materials, including the website. So looking at where we may need to tweak that a little bit, change some of the messaging. We already have some thoughts, but we want to make sure that we get everyone's input before we start acting. And then developing available communications resources, again, that economies of scale, wherever we have a lot of communications resources on the table, we should be using those. And then establishing direction for messaging, laying the groundwork for communication plan development. So again, this is not a prescriptive effort, but it is very much an action-based effort. The deliverables include the one-on-one meeting summaries, some of which I have today, We'll be hosting a board site tour. One of the things I really want to gather is not just the, we've been meeting with your teams. We also want to meet with the board, walk through, have an idea of what your perspective is and where your priorities lie, so that we're not just going through the member agencies, but also those who are on the board. We know you all are using your valuable time to attend these meetings, to be a part of this, and we want to make sure that we capture that in the overall assessment. And then we'll provide that initial findings report. So I know we all know who these are, but it would behoove me to make sure that I'm going through IID, County of Riverside, the Torres Martinez Desert Korean Indians, CVWD, or Coachella Valley Water District, because there's actually lots of those CVWDs, in Imperial County, California. With the Torres Martinez Desert Korean Indians, we met with them on October 24th. Their number one concern was actually the exposed playa and health concerns, which I know we've been hearing a lot about today. So thank you so much for that wonderful setup. I really appreciate that. They're also really striving to develop the wetlands, which is something that they've been talking about for a while, and are looking for ways in which to implement that effectively and in collaboration with everything else that we're currently doing at the Salton Sea. This health concern may make housing unavailable for their residents and for their tribe members. So that's a major concern of theirs. And then the possibilities, finally, at the very bottom, after we get through kind of all of that, we get the considering the ways to make the Torres Martinez lands contiguous is something they're interested in pursuing, but something we should just know. And then the economic development possibilities, including recreation, raw materials, and gravel aggregate. But that's not the only thing. That's all the way at the bottom. So just really noting that the health is their number one priorities. And one of the things that you'll see in this, and that I'm going to close with, is that idea that health is a primary concern for most people when talking about the Salton Sea. Habitat is also there, as are these opportunities, but really making sure that that we note that in the meetings that we've had so far, that's been the discussion point. When meeting with Coachella Valley Water District, they were very supportive of the communications efforts. They also are interested in seeing what happens and what next steps might look like. But because of the chromium-6 that I know that they're dealing with in the next year or two, there's a lot of their assets are pretty strapped. Their resources are pretty strapped at this moment in time. However, they're happy to be a part of whatever it is that we feel like we want to move forward with. Moving into next steps, we're going to continue to identify resources, meeting with IID in Riverside County, as I mentioned before. Next, building a list of available communication channels. We want to host that board site tour to provide additional insight directly from the board. Craft those key messages that we talked about, leveraging information from research and findings. So far, our real true north in that key messages is that H2O idea, the health, habitat, and opportunities. And that's really been shown to be accurate in terms of our conversations, and what I am also hearing from the press, from the media, from meetings that I attend to, because I'm very much involved in the water industry within California and definitely within both the Coachella and Imperial counties, Coachella Valley and Imperial counties, because it's not all of side exactly, but definitely want to make sure that we are hearing that over and over again. And then distributing key messages to leadership, member agencies, and strategic partners. So we're all on the same page, and we're, as a representative of the authority, we're speaking with the same voice. And then finally, identifying and connecting with additional stakeholder groups, as I mentioned before. So just a little wrap up. Are there any questions?
My only question I have, you did mention initial findings report. Do you have like a tentative, I know it can move, a tentative date to have that finished by?
We're hoping for January. It will depend on whether or not we can schedule that Imperial County meeting in December.
Okay.
It's not a huge lift once we kind of have all the meetings.
Yeah.
And definitely no later than January for sure.
Okay.
Or November would be better.
Yeah. We would love an Imperial County meeting in November.
Yeah.
But I'm not holding my breath.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your report. Does anybody have any questions?
So I appreciate it, Tara. This is very preliminary in the effort. We're still digging into all of the different resources, obviously the Torres Martinez portfolio of resources for advocacy and public relations is not as vast as organizations like CVWD, and they're all different. And so we're just trying to figure out how they all work together. So we look forward to meeting with all the rest of the member agencies and reporting back on that.
Thank you. I agree, because they all have different priorities. So it's interesting to see what they are. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate the opportunity, and I'll see you next time.
Okay. All right, let's go ahead and move on. SB 583.
So our next item on the agenda, he's gone. Mr. Reyes was talking about the Conservancy, and the Prop 4 actually had SB 583 is the Conservancy bill, and Prop 4 had money in it for the Conservancy. And I just wanted to report to the board that Prop 4 did pass, and that pursuant to SB 583, over the course of the next couple of years, the Conservancy will be stood up. It's conditioned to have a general manager, if you will, by January of 2026, which will be appointed by the Secretary for the California Natural Resources Agency. In January of 2020, by January of 2027, the board will have been formed, and they will select who the general manager of the organization is at that time. There's $10 million in Prop 4 for either or both the Salton Sea Authority and the Conservancy. So we need to work collaboratively with the state and the appropriate state agencies, because all of the appointed positions are going to be appointed by different state responsible bodies representing different stakeholder groups on the process to stand this organization up over the next couple of years. It was created with fairly narrow responsibilities, that being principally to own and operate completed projects by the SMP, and also to own land. And so one of the things that I thought, there's a lot of work to be done in actually creating this organization over the next 2 years. And I think the authority has an important role in doing that. Each one of the authority's member agencies will have an appointed representative on that board, and it will include the Salton Sea Authority president on a continuing basis. So whichever organization, say IID, would be appointing their representative to the Conservancy, it would be President Doc Stater. And that's the way it will be operated. How it comes together and how it's going to be funded on a continuing basis is a lot of work that the Conservancy will have to figure out. How that $10 million is to be used. I think that when the bill was going through, there was much more money for everybody. So $10 million left over between the two of us. The decision has to be made how those monies are going to be used, either for the implementation of the Conservancy or for other purposes of the authority as allowed by the grant. And that's going to need to be worked out. So I just wanted to alert the board of that situation. Obviously, I think the Conservancy can be an extremely useful tool. I don't know to what extent it can be used for addressing some of the issues that were addressed earlier regarding site control and site access. I don't know whether or not lands or easements could be transferred on a forward basis to the Conservancy that would allow future projects to be developed, whether it's federal lands, private lands, or state land. But I think those things need to be worked out over the next couple of years. So now that we have a Conservancy, we got to figure out what we're going to do with it. So, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Does anybody have any questions? You all voted for it, right? If there's, go ahead. No, okay, if there's no questions, let's move on.
So I did want to go back to Tara's presentation, and one thing I did want to mention is that we view the state as a critical partner in this communications effort, and all the work that Miguel and CNRA does in that space is really important, and coordinating and collaborating to make sure that we're using all of our resources and all the resources of all the stakeholders is an important part of our success. So I wanted to make sure that wasn't overlooked. Okay.
Okay. Thank you. All right, let's go ahead and move on.
Yeah.
The feasibility study update.
So we are going to have a more fulsome presentation next month from the Corps on that, Madam President. In the interest of time, I have presentation material that was provided at the summit regarding the status of the feasibility study. And so I'd like to defer to the material in the packet. I do want to point out, I do want to point out that the feasibility study, and I think I've reported this in the past, was originally approved as a 3-year, $3 million study. We have successfully secured authorization for a mega study that'll be probably 6 or 7 years in length, about $22.5 million in cost, of which approximately 5.378 of that has already been secured at the federal level, which requires a 50% local sponsor match. And so the total funding that's currently available based on the local sponsor match is 10.875. So we've got almost half of the funding for the complete effort banked. And the local sponsor is the Salton Sea Authority and the Department of Water Resources. And under the agreement, we're actually jointly liable for the expenses, but we do have an indemnification agreement from DWR for the local sponsor portion of that. And we're grateful for that. And so other than that, I'm just happy to answer any questions. Next month, we'll have a representative from the Corps here, hopefully in person, if not via Zoom, to provide a more complete update.
I look forward to that. Thank you. Project updates.
The only thing I would report on the North Shore pilot project is we did have 2 community engagements, and I touched on that earlier. I think they were very successful. We utilized, we worked with CV Strategies, helped us in disseminating some of that information. We worked through the state and their outlets, and we cast a pretty broad net. The larger public event, unfortunately, was on the 7th game of the World Series. So we had people both present and via Zoom, but it's hard to plan it, anticipating whether the Dodgers are going to make it to the 7th game of the World Series or not. So, or was it the 6th game? I don't know. Not a Dodgers. Shame to admit. But on Desert Shores, we do have one item that I'm bringing before you. We have previously processed through the projects committee a request to submit an RFP for technical services related to the project. We have been working on this for a long time. The community's been very anxious trying to advance a project. We had hoped that the technical information that was available would be sufficient for the project. It turned out not to be, so we had to secure the information from professional services. We put together an RFP, and we brought alongside GAFCON has been working with us on the development of a feasibility study and plan and vision and direction for this project. We brought them on additionally to help us with this RFP process. And I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Paul Nahar of GAFCON Inc. to talk about the RFP process.
Thank you, Patrick. Good morning. As Patrick mentioned, an RFP was prepared for the purposes of obtaining statements of qualifications and proposals from qualified and invited firms to conduct the feasibility study comprising of the geotechnical, geologic, and hydrogeologic services for the project, essentially to take into consideration the site conditions, the location, the quality, and quantity of available water, which will be necessary to fill and maintain the channels for the long term. On September 11th, 2024, an RFQ was posted on National Government Bidding website and also distributed to local qualified firms. We're pleased that we received 6 expressions of interest from qualified local and national engineering firms. On September 24th, the 6 interested bidders participated in a site walk at Desert Shores to examine the project conditions and ask questions relating to the RFP. We're pleased that community member Tom Sefton was present and shared his information about the project and the conditions. Following that, additional written questions were also received and answered. A selection committee was appointed. The selection committee consisted of panelists from the state, the county of Imperial, the local community, SSA, and GAFCON. Two highly qualified firms, one national, Tetra Tech, and one local firm, Nicholas Engineering, were interviewed by the selection committee. The committee considered each of the firm's background, their project work plan, schedule, and fee proposal, which included an optional borrow site for a scope of work that may be considered at a later date. Following the interviews, best and final fee proposals were requested from both firms. The committee reviewed and scored the qualifications of each of the firms and unanimously selected Nicholas Engineering. Nicholas Engineering is a well-known and highly qualified local civil engineering firm and environmental consulting firm with an emphasis in federal and municipal clients with offices in El Centro, Yuma, and San Diego. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have relating to the process.
So we did receive a bid from Nicholas Engineering, which happened to be the lowest bidder. But we scored the entire presentation and proposal. When they did their work, they did come up with, some additional work that they recommended. So their bid includes $306,479 for the defined scope of work for the project, plus $102,897 for an additional scope of work that they recommended, for a total of $409,376. We have had discussions with the Bureau of Reclamation, and they do not approve or disapprove vendors, contractors, or contracts, but they did acknowledge that the scope of work is allowable under the budget and funds are available under the grant budget for this work. We believe that this technical assessment is important to determine how to move forward best with this project for the benefit of the community, and we're recommending its approval.
So do you need to memorialize that with action or codify it with
I
action?
need approval to enter into a contract with Nicholas Engineering for a total of $409,376, subject to council's review of the final contract.
And if I may inquire, Madam Chair, that is your recommendation, Mr. O'Dowd?
It is my recommendation.
Madam Chair, if there's no other discussion, I'm prepared to make a motion.
And Imperial County would second.
Yep.
Okay, then I agree. We had a motion, seconded. Is there further discussion?
I think there's public comment.
Oh. Public comment, Mr. Tom Septon?
Let me unmute. Yeah, the majority of the community will be supportive of Nicholas Engineering doing the work. We did some preliminary studies of seepage loss and have seen that while the lower elevations of the channels do not appear to have much loss, the higher elevations of the channels have very substantial loss. So there is a high probability that the additional work suggested by Nicholas Engineering to investigate a borrow site immediately north of the Desert Shores channels as a possible source of clay would be a valuable addition. And that is included in the budget of slightly over 409,000. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Septon. We appreciate that. I did have a motion and a second. If there's no further discussions, can we have a roll call vote?
President Dockstader,
Yes.
Director Plancarte,
Yes.
Director Aguilar,
Yes.
Director Cardenas,
Yes.
motion passed.
Thank you. And I have nothing to report on Bombay Beach.
Bombay Beach has been busy, but we'll talk offline about that later. Okay, how about federal reports? Let's go, Lisa.
Hi there. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
All good? Okay, excellent. Good morning still, I think, for you guys. So we've had a lot of change since last week in DC. I put a board memo together for you, really sort of about how those changes will play out as far as we know. I've been through a lot of these sort of changes in administration here in DC. So if anyone kind of wants to dive deeper into that, I'm a former Senate leadership aide. And so I watched with a lot of interest to see the Republican caucus select John Thune yesterday as the new majority leader. That's a pretty interesting pick to make. It will put control of the Senate and its procedures in the hands of really an institutionalist in the Senate, someone who believes in the filibuster and sort of regular order and things like that. So it'll be sort of interesting to see how that plays out. With respect to really our kind of most significant federal priority, which is the Army Corps of Engineers study that Patrick was talking about earlier, you never know coming into an election what the world will look like. We did a lot of work this year to put that study on firm financial footing, and that was a smart thing to do. So we, as Patrick indicated, we have really enough money set aside for the study to do the work we need to do in the next few years. That's important because in all likelihood, one thing we can say for sure is that the budgetary situation here in DC will be probably far different than it's been in the last 4 years. So having those resources set aside so that we can continue to do the work that is important to advance that study is really important. I do want to remind everyone that the authorization for that study came at the end of the Trump administration. So it was signed by President Trump. So we have had bipartisan support for moving forward, with that study. Some things that we'll just sort of see how they play out. We are in a continuing resolution situation in terms of funding the government. And so we have not passed yet the fiscal year 2025 appropriations bills. It is likely that we will have a continuing resolution until March. So in the interim between now and March, we'll really sort of see how the Republican Party wants to approach appropriations. We have had earmarks back, which is we call now congressionally directed spending, and we've benefited from having that back. We've had earmarks for the Salton Sea since those returned in 2021. The Republican caucus is sort of split on whether to allow members of Congress to what's called earmark appropriations for specific purposes and in their states and districts. And so that really remains to be seen, kind of how the caucus will kind of move forward in that way. As you all know, we have now two Democratic senators. Congressman Ruiz was reelected. Congressman Calvert's a Republican, and his seat was recently called. So we will have a member on the Appropriations Committee in the Republican caucus in the House, which is always helpful to have. Some other things just for the member agencies sort of think about. One of the early things that the new administration and the new Congress is likely to do is work on what's called reconciliation. That can have the effect of actually kind of going sort of looking back and clawing back money that is within the federal agencies. And so, for the projects that we have that are funded out of, for example, reclamation IRA money, it's important really to get those monies obligated and sort of moved along, before the change in the administration and before some of those policy changes may move through Congress. But in terms of the Army Corps of Engineers, we don't know yet. I have not actually yet heard of any new position for that or nominee for the Assistant Secretary for Civil Works, which will be the lead official that will be responsible for working with us on the Army Corps of Engineers study. That position is now held by Mike Connor. We'll just sort of, as things move along, we will we'll continue to to work with Congress and the new administration and our work to advance that study. But again, because of the work we did last year to really put it on such good financial footing, we should be in a pretty good position to be moving forward with that particular priority. Does anyone have any questions?
Just if I may, Madam Chair, any predictions on Secretary of Interior, DOI, maybe coming from
I have not,
California?
there's interior ag and the core, I have not heard yet, but I think that reclamation obviously will be important to, to the work that's going on in the Colorado River. I'm sure you're working IID with your folks, just making sure that the commitment money associated with the agreement a couple of years ago, and obviously like the other work that you're doing, that where funding's coming through, in particular the IRA, it is important to kind of lock all that down sooner rather than later because of how reconciliation might unfold. So I'm sure.
It was someone coming from California,
Maybe.
Oh, for interior, yeah.
little bird.
Little owl.
Coming from, okay.
Little burrowing owl.
Or a little burrowing owl.
A little burrowing owl. Yeah. So I will let you know though, if I hear any scuttlebutt on that. So nominations that was one of my jobs when I worked for the Democratic leader in the Senate. So I'm always interested in seeing who they float for positions and things like that. So
It has certainly been interesting.
it is, the longer you've worked here, it's not, it just becomes less jarring, I guess. And you sort of can, we worked my firm with Senator Thune for years, because my partner's from South Dakota. And so, that was very happy to see that. I think he'll be great. I think he'll be a great majority leader. So I think that's positive. I think for a state like California, I think it's, it's helpful and important to have a leader that is not likely to want to get rid of the filibuster on legislation. That is protective of a state that has 2 Democratic senators, right? So I think that it says some interesting things that was that the Republican caucus selected Thune. So anyway.
Thank you, Lisa. We appreciate it. Any more comments?
I just say Congressman Ruiz has been a stalwart supporter of the Salton Sea. Congressman Calvert was the original member of the Salton Sea Task Force in Congress. Hopefully they can work together for our mutual benefit, but it's going to take a lot of work. And I'm thankful that Lisa is on our team, and let's get to work.
Yeah, and I would say, Congressman Calvert, I think of all of, and meaning no disrespect to any other member of Congress, but when I started working with that office, when I started working for you all, he really knows so much about the Salton Sea. He has just a lot of, he personally does not need to rely on staff to kind of understand what's going on. And I think that is certainly an asset and, to us moving forward. And, Congressman Ruiz has been fantastic. It's always good to have people on both sides of the aisle understand and care about your issues. And I think in our case, we certainly have that. I think our 2 members in the Senate will still be on, highly relevant committees for us. And because the minority has a fair amount of procedural rights in the Senate, there's a lot of work that they can continue to do for us. It is not like the House in that respect. So, I'm not expecting dramatic changes for us. It just sort of shuffles the chessboard a little bit, which is something I enjoy trying to figure out. So I will be working with Patrick and all of you guys to do that as we move forward in the new year and the new Congress and new administration.
Thank you, Lisa. Can we move on to state reports?
Yes. The state elections are still, I think, in flux. for this district. And I think it would be best to provide a more substantive update of that next time we meet.
Okay, let's move on. Miguel Hernandez, you're up. I'm trying to get us out of here by noon, but it's not gonna happen.
No,
But we're gonna be
close.
close. We're gonna be close.
Yeah, I'll try to keep it brief too. Hi, it's me, Miguel again. Just have a quick report back on some of the events that we had in the month of October. The SSMP was all over the region, different events were happening. We had a community meeting at the Bombay Beach community to report back and provide an update on our vegetation enhancement project and or wetlands enhancement project. Both of this project are on both sides of the community of Bombay Beach. We hosted this event, co-hosted the event with our partners at Audubon, California. A recording of this meeting is available on our website. We were able to share updates as far as the 35% design that we're currently on, where the project is moving forward, and how community can help us continue to shape and have actually participate within the project footprint, and how the project's going to move forward. This is a model that we want to implement into the future regarding how we connect with communities from the get-go, and continue to create that feedback loop as how their feedback is helping us shape the project, and also be transparent in specific areas where that input can actually shape the project, and the areas that are pretty much set for project design and implementation. So again, that it's on our website. We also had a ceremony where we celebrated the expansion of the Species Conservation Habitat Project. Thank you all that were able to be part of this important milestone. Secretary Crawford was out here at the Salton Sea with many other leaders. We had different representatives and a lot of our champions that were there at this event. So we, celebrating the commitments from the federal partners with significant investment for the Salton Sea, but also how the project is expanding its current footprint, and also share the potential that it has to further expand this project. So I think it was a well-attended event. We had some good media coverage on this event. So we also, to mention that we're nurturing our relationships with the regional media, so we can help get the word out about the work that's happening at the Salton Sea. And this was a very important event that happened, in the month of October. And also about getting the word out, we continue to have our community tours at our projects. We actually started to have public tours for our vegetation enhancement project. We only had a couple, maybe 3 public site visits, meaning folks from the community were able to come in and see the project firsthand. And we also had a community meeting to celebrate, a community tour to celebrate Latino Heritage Month on the 5th. I'm glad to say that this was the first Spanish-led tour. We had never hosted a Spanish event or tour in this case, so this was tailored for communities that were monolingual Spanish. It also actually tended to shift a little bit into the bilingual side, but it was a pretty good experience, and also a good exercise for the team to kind of help us steer how we connect with communities in the future in the Spanish language. And also we participated at the events that were mentioned earlier. The Salton Sea Summit, or team was out and part of different panels, part of 4 panels actually, part of the policy and planning panel, community needs, project and development, and the ecology panel. So I believe those conferences will be uploaded pretty soon on their Salton Sea Summit website. So our team was really involved on those events as well. And also the Environmental Justice Summit led by Comité Cívico del Valle. We were invited to present there a overview of our program, what we do, who we are, but also where we are with our projects in regards to the Species Conservation Habitat Project, Veg Enhancement Project, and all those projects that are coming down the pipeline. So we were able to connect with different folks from the community, but also visitors that came from other parts of the state. and to share more about our work. And of course, a good learning opportunity for us that were there and participated on this also important conference. And just to reiterate an earlier invitation about our virtual meeting that we will be having on the 19th for the MIP work plan. Again, that's on the 19th at 1 p.m. You can find the link on our website, saltonc.ca.gov. And that concludes my report.
Before you
Yes.
finish, how many people did you have for your SSMP in Bombay Beach? Like how many attendees? Like if you had to just guess.
I would say roughly about 15 community members
Hmm.
plus a team that was there to present.
Yeah, I would have thought it would have been higher. Thank you.
Mhm.
Appreciate that. And then I'm gonna give Bombay Beach a little bit of a little shout out, a little plug. They have their Salton Sea Stroll coming up, not this Saturday, but next Saturday, the 23rd at 10 a.m. If anybody wants to go out there and stroll. It's a fun event. I think I've been at,
Yeah.
this is their 3rd annual, maybe. It's kind of fun.
Yeah, and if I may just make a quick plug on a Salton Sea tree planting event that's happening this weekend. This is led by Ecomedia Compass. The Salton Sea Management Program team will be there. We'll provide a quick community update there. Again, it's this Saturday, I believe, at 9 a.m. Yeah, so we'll be there too. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, moving on. Salton Sea State Recreation Area, Taylor Unziker.
I get to say good afternoon. So good afternoon. Just some quick updates about the recreation area. We had roughly 1,100 visitors come through the visitor center, 236 campers in the campground. So that's a uptick for day use visitors and a downturn for campers at the recreation area. We were able to serve as the venue for Alianza's Salton Sea Summit event. So that was nice, great to see everybody at that event. In addition, we've had a number of different colleges come through. So kind of getting the word out to different groups about what's going on at the Salton Sea and understanding the area and kind of getting a better voice for what's happening down here. So we had Mount San Antonio College and University of San Diego come through this past month. So that's it for me. I'll keep it short.
Appreciate that, Taylor. And then just a random thought, it would be interesting if at a future meeting, we could see percentage-wise how much visitors are increasing through the years. Obviously, there would be like a dip in COVID and then go back up. Just FYI for you. I love these fun facts.
I have a whole chart for you. I just, I'm usually here at the end of the meeting, so I don't like taking up too much time.
We can move you up.
Whatever works best for you all.
Next time. But yeah, I would love to hear that.
Okay, great.
All right, moving on. Salton Sea Action Committee is Alan Pace.
I do not see Mr. Pace online.
Don't either. He was on earlier and he probably went to lunch.
Probably.
Executive Director.
Madam President, we've covered a lot today. I don't have anything else to add, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
If no one has any questions, the next meeting will be Thursday, January 16th, 10 a.m. at CVWD. I declare this meeting adjourned.
Very good.